By recording, WBJC FM presents Inside Gene Shepard.
Now, don't call up anymore, you dumb cluck. Don't call up and tell me that they misspelled my name on the tickets to the show at Princeton this Friday night. I know. Listen, I'm so used to having my name misspelled that I think it's misspelled when it comes to me once in a while spelled right. As a matter of fact, my name was misspelled on my birth certificate. And not only that, when I graduated from college, misspelled on the diploma. Well, wait, that's not all. You know that my name is misspelled on my Exxon credit card? And that's very embarrassing, you know, when I have to keep remembering, you know, when I write the thing down to misspell it on the thing there. And my name is also misspelled on other more embarrassing things. For example, on my car registration. Yeah. Well, hell, you know, a couple of months ago, see, I'm going along the Jersey Turnpike. You know how when you're in the traffic there, your head starts going to sleep, and I'm just going along there, you know, doing the thing, and the smoke is coming in the crud, the Jersey beauties on all sides of me, you know, all those wonderful refineries and the Jersey swamp. I love to watch nothing more interesting in the spring than to drive along the Jersey Turnpike out there by exit 14 and 15 and enjoy the spring scenery. It's just beautiful. The smoke changes color in the spring, you know. You can tell it's spring because the smoke gets a little greenish, you know, that drifts over the horizon there, and instead of the usual winter gray. And so I'm looking at the scenery there, and all of a sudden I see these red lights go back at me, you know, and he comes out with the little thing, goes whoop, whoop, like that. That means, okay, buddy. So I pull over. And he says, let me see, come on, get out your registration, your driver's license, where the hell you think you're going, huh? Well, you know, it's kind of embarrassing. You can't tell a guy that you're heading for East Passaic, you know. You should say at least the French Riviera. And so I hand him the stuff there. And he says, let me see, what are you trying to give me here? I says, what do you mean? He says, your name is on, well, you got two different things here. This ain't your car, is it? And I said, well, yes, it is, actually. He said, well, you got two names then, huh? I says, no, I haven't got two names, but I just have to live this way, sir. Sir, by the way, you have to remember to use the word sir when you're in trouble at all times, sir. You'd agree? Many a guy has gone down the chute just from forgetting to use that word, sir. Now, it depends on how you use it. You can use the word sir to really be an ultimate put-down, you know, like, yeah, I know, sir. You know, the zap, you'll get it then, too. So there's all little techniques you learn to get by in this jungle of existence. And so after I explained to him that my name, being such, is misspelled at all times, he then misspelled it on the ticket he gave me. So which of course I proceeded to ignore, because after all the ticket wasn't made out to me. Oh, would you please sneak in a little of that bad stuff? Just the second one. No, the second one. The other one, you know, the sneaky one. He said, sneak it in. Sneak it in. No, I knew it. That's good. Now, hold it there. I just needed that to clear up my sinuses. Now set it back again. There, my sinuses feel better now. Well, I'm forever blowing bubbles. But don't worry if your tickets say that you're actually going to a Jerry Vale concert this coming Friday night at at the Princeton at Alexander Hall. That's all part of the great vast plan. That's part of our. See, we start the jokes even before the show starts. It's the way we work it. So speaking of jokes, we would like to at this point salute. Crime is getting to be so prosaic. I mean, we're so used to crime today that nobody pays much attention to crime anymore. Used to be. I say that the reason that Bonnie and Clyde and John Dillinger are such big deals is because in their day, people didn't sit around and watch crime shows 24 hours a day. The fact that somebody held up the bank was a big deal. But in a day of like now, 1975, when crime shows are proliferating and cop shows are even more proliferating. I mean, you get shows like SWAT, where these guys come pouring out of what looks like an armored car with bazookas. I mean, boy, that's a peaceful society, isn't it? They go leaping over fences and they have rocket launchers and all that kind of stuff just to catch this poor little pickpocket. It was terrible the other day. I felt sorry for the guy they were after. One poor little guy wearing a Sears Roebuck sports shirt was laying on top of a building, and it looked like he had a Remington 22. And he'd been shooting that 22 around the air there, see, and they sent the SWAT team after him. And, of course, they unloaded the heavy artillery, rocket launchers were going. And this guy's laying up there clinging to the roof. And a terrible thing happened to me. Halfway through the show, I began to sympathize with the criminal. And that's just, not what the idea of the show was. And I kept saying, get one of them! Get one of them! Go on, Lefty! Hey, there's that one hiding behind the car! Get him! And he was shooting that poor little 22. He had 22 target shorts. I mean, the little tiny was, he was having trouble putting the hole through a slice of American cheese with that little gun. And they were shooting these, they had Sten guns, Bren guns, automatic rifles, pistols, AK-70s, the whole works. Rocket goes swishing back. So, we're living in very, very heavily armed times, so I don't think Bonnie and Clyde would have made it today. There's Bonnie and Clyde's working all over America. Nobody even gives them a second glance. Why? Did you hear the story the other day? There's a bank held up over here in Jersey. Yeah, these two guys came in and they jumped out of their car. They had a Pinto, and that's kind of a letdown, isn't it? Remember the good old days when there'd be a piece in the paper about a bank robbery. It says the alleged thugs fled in a large black automobile. You can't say the alleged thugs fled in a Pinto runabout. That's kind of sad, with that little motor popping away there and the Reynolds wrap hood and everything. So, nevertheless, you just can't see Spencer Tracy hanging out of the back window of a Dodge Colt, shooting it out with the cops who are coming up behind him, in a VW 1600 wagon. It just doesn't have this, But the whole point about Bonnie and Clyde is that they were big because, crime was a thing people just heard about. They never really saw it. So when it happened in the neighborhoods, Bonnie comes in and they hold up the store and they shoot the guy and all that, that was big talk. Today, no way. Did you hear about in Jersey? These two guys drove into this bank. And they were going to hold it up, see? And so, sure enough, they get everybody lined up against the counters in there. And naturally, there's people are laying on the floor and all that. And somebody got out, see, and he runs next door. And he goes into this hamburger joint next door. And he hollers, they're holding up the bank next door. Nobody even looked up. They just kept drinking their coffee. What the hell, It's the third time this week. I mean, you can't get excited after 7 or 8 of them. And so Bonnie and Clyde lived in a day when you could make a reputation. It must really infuriate a guy that's a bank robber today. I mean, knocks over 47 banks, and he doesn't even get past page 38. And he just never makes it in the front page. Just so hard to make it these days, right, gang? Gee, So, nevertheless, we have to salute a guy who's really trying to make a little excitement in the neighborhood with his crime. In Covington, Kentucky. Now, do you know anything about Covington? I lived in Covington. Seriously, do you ever pick up a paper, you're sitting around and you're eating a hamburger or something and you pick up a paper and there's a news report from a place where you once lived. Now, I've discovered that most people live and die in the same town. So it never happens to them. And if they do, they make one move in their life. They move from Plainfield to Bloomfield, which is like moving 3 stops up the line on a bus. And so they don't have the excitement of reading these little bits that come from all over the country, places where you once lived, right? Oh, so I never talk much about my Covington, Kentucky days. They were colorful days. In Covington, Kentucky, a bank robber, or at least a guy who tried to rob a bank. I'd love to see this in canon. I really would. He tried to rob a bank by ramming a 16-ton bulldozer right through the side of the bank. Now that's the direct approach. I mean, there's no subtlety to that. You know, just drive a bulldozer, boom. The bulldozer shredded the side of the building and pushed a steel safe weighing several thousand pounds, 15 feet. In fact, the safe weighed over 4 tons. He pushed it 15. That's a serious attempt, you'd have to say. Part of the bank floor collapsed. The roof fell in, and the bulldozer got stuck in the hole that it made. And then it conked out on him. You know, the motor, he couldn't get it out. At that point, he just cut out and ran. I mean, with an empty sack in his hand. It says the police are now investigating. I like that line at the end. Talk about redundant lines. The police are investigating. I'd just like to say the police are not investigating. I figured just a local native needed some cash. Well, you know, that happens at places like Covington. I'll tell you about Covington. You want to know about Covington? Well, all right. I never talked to you know, about that time. There's certain times in your life you just black out, right? You just don't want to hear about. You don't talk about them. And that's true of everybody. Absolutely everybody. Like, you can be with somebody for 10 years, you know, some friend of yours, and all of a sudden, without any warning, he'll just say, well, that's like the time that the Tuaregs almost caught me and they shot at me. It's what, Al? The Tuaregs? Oh, yeah, I used to be in the Egyptian army. You say, what? Oh, I don't like to talk about it. And at that point, you realize that your life is not an open book to other people, nor is their life an open book to you. And in my case, I don't talk much about Covington. Not because it was an unpleasant time, but it just was one of those, there's just a time. You know, there are certain times in your life when nothing really registers. You've been through times like that where you just sort of, you're there, you know. It's like your whole head, everything. Your life is asleep. And for a year and a half, I lived on Madison Avenue in Covington, Kentucky. Now, Covington is right across the Ohio River from Cincinnati. And in fact, it's closer to Midtown Cincinnati than most people living in Cincinnati. Yeah, you know, because Cincinnati's a great big city, and the main section of town is right on the river. So if you could live way out on the other side of Cincinnati, you know, up around places like Silverton and Avondale, and you could be so far out of the main part of Cincinnati that a guy living in Kentucky is closer to Midtown Cincinnati. See, well, that's the kind of place. And right between the cities is this great big river. I mean, and it's a big mother. Oh, that's a river. I mean, that's that old Devil River. And it really is. When the Ohio is a mean river at that point. It just goes. It really flows. It's not at all uncommon to walk across the bridge. They have a suspension bridge, a couple of them across the river there, see. And they had every night I would walk across the suspension bridge because I liked to. It was right across I lived almost at the foot of the bridge, right on the other side of the bridge from the city. And I would leave the city and walk out down to the riverfront, and I saw some great sights in the riverfront. They have a levee down there. You probably, you know, I'll bet there's a thing in Cincinnati that is seen on more commercials and movies than any other single thing that I know of in any city outside of New York and the Empire State Building. And it's never identified with Cincinnati. It's the old Delta Queen, which is the paddle wheeler. I have ridden on the Delta Queen. You know what guys used to do in the Delta Queen? The Delta Queen used to go up the river. It still does, you know. The Delta Queen operates out of Cincinnati. It's a real paddle wheeler. It's got this great big paddle that actually works. See, a lot of paddle wheelers are fakes. Like, yeah, well, they are. People will go down and they have these fake paddle wheelers that are actually propeller-driven ships, and they have a fake paddle wheel on the back to give it a little color, you know. But the paddle wheeler, the old Delta Queen, there used to be two of them, the Delta Queen and the River Queen. and they were twin ships, and they were built long time ago, like before World War I. They were built around the time around 1910, and they were still operating. They still are. See, so this is not the old days. These things are artifacts, and they'd sit down at the levee, looking just like out of a scene out of summertime. You know, Porgy and Bess, and it was always hot. This time of the year, oh God, does it get hot? Oh, you have no idea how hot that Ohio Valley can get. If you think it gets hot in this area, friend, see, that's a valley, and it's moist because the river is there, and this great river plain is all around, and these hills rise up, and there's not a breath of air. The wind will not blow for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months, and it's just like there's this great big gob of hot, moist, warm, fetid river swamp-like air settles down on Cincinnati just about the 1st of June. And moist, oh, you talk about humidity. Listen, the humidity was such that if you wanted a glass of water and you didn't want to walk down the street, all you had to do was take a glass out of your hand and wave it around in the air, and the water starts pouring on your head. I mean, if you went out to the ballpark and clapped too loud, you'd cause a little rainstorm. It would come pouring down. They'd warn you, don't clap today. So, it was that kind of thing. So every night I would walk over the bridge, see, and this bridge is about a mile long. It's a tremendous river, and the water, you'd see this dark water, and the water's deep under this bridge. It's 40, 50, 60 feet deep, and it's filled with all kinds of strange things. For example, channel cats go drifting down the Ohio River in the middle of summer. These are huge catfish. You wouldn't believe the size some of these catfish get. If you've never seen a catfish, man, a catfish makes your average shark look comfortable and small. A really big catfish will weigh 300-400 pounds. And they're really something. So you'd walk across over this bridge, and it's very high, and they had a narrow catwalk just for pedestrians. It was a pedestrian bridge, and you paid 2 cents to walk on a bridge. And there's a guy sitting in this little house, and you'd come up and you'd give him 2 cents, and you'd start walking across the bridge. Well, it was the kind of bridge, that had an iron grating under your feet. You could look straight down at the water. It's kind of scary. And now you're way out in the middle there, the bridge, and the bridge was a suspension bridge, and it would sway. And if you looked up at the sky over your head, you see these great big suspension cables coming down, the great big arching cables, and you just see the whole thing just moving back and forth, and you'd hear it creaking and the wind blowing, and you'd smell the river. Fantastic smell. If you don't know the smell of one of America's great rivers, it's not a bad smell. Don't assume it's like a swamp. I think it isn't. It's a river smell. It's a smell almost so primal. It's difficult to describe it. If you haven't smelled it, well, you have. You must. If it's primal, you know what it's like. And so it's ancient living things and dying things and ancient waters and ancient mud and ancient heat and the whole work. See, so I'm out across this bridge, and I first night I remember walking across, and it arches way up and it goes down on the other side, and as it goes down it gets down further, and there are deltas and levees there, you see, because they have tremendous floods. Well, you get down on the other side, down in Covington, and the temperature, if anything, is 10 to 15 degrees warmer than it is on the Cincinnati side. For geographical reasons, there's a ring of hills that just encompasses Covington, just goes right around it like a pocket or a cup. And I was really having a tough time. I was a student, and I didn't have much money, and so I had rented this apartment. At first I lived in the Y, and that was impossible, I'm telling you. And then I decided to get an apartment, so I rented this little apartment. It was about the size of, maybe 3 average Madison Avenue phone booths, like end to end. And it was over a jewelry store, I remember, right on the main street. And have you ever gone down through any small American cities, and you see all these stores, you see jewelry stores, and you see appliance stores, and you see these blank windows above them? Hardly anybody looks up there. Well, I lived in one of those blank windows above the jewelry store. And what I didn't know when I rented the apartment was that this guy, the guy that owned the jewelry store, he also had some kind of
I don't know what the story was, but he had right over, or rather right under my room. I was sort of in the side and the back. I could look out over the street, and it was on a corner, you see, and it was a corner apartment, but right under my room, right under my apartment, he had a boiler. A boiler. So that I didn't realize, I had rented this thing in the winter, see, it was kind of cold, so the boiler felt great. The apartment was warm. I just thought it was nice. What I did not realize was that boiler was going winter and summer, and it was like sitting on top of a coal stove. and by June, my apartment was about maybe 300-400 degrees. That was in the shade when it was cool, when the wind was blowing. And when it would get hot, it was so hot that you just stagger. You just open the door and just stagger back. So every night, I'd open up all the windows. I had no money at all. And I'd come in with a bag of White Castle. That was my meal. See, I'd get these White Castle hamburgers. I grew to love the White Castle hamburger in those days. I mean, you know, in moments of adversity, you learn about things. And I'd come in with a sack of White Castles. I had 2 or 3 White Castles, and I'd get this orange drink. And I would save the ice out of it because it was the only cool thing within blocks. I'd take this ice in, and I'd sit there and I'd drink the orange drink very carefully, and I'd eat my White Castle hamburgers very carefully. It's a high point of my day. See, I was having this elegant meal, and I'd look out of the window. It was getting dark, and the fireflies are drifting around. And the heat is coming up from the river, and I could smell the river, great waves of this river smell. And just about this time at night, about 8:15, 9:15, it was just getting really dark. I'd hear in the distance, I'd hear this. You'd hear this boop, 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 boop. For a long time, I didn't know what the hell it was, see? It was boop, 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 and then it would go away. And I had just come to that area, so I didn't quite know what it was. I figured there was some kind of a carnival around there. But one night, I came over the bridge late. A fantastic sight. If you've never seen this, you just don't know what it's like. I just have to describe it to you. The river curved away. If you're walking over the bridge from Cincinnati, to your left, the river makes a great, big, sweeping, tremendous right-hand turn. There's a great big bend in the river, and these dark hills came down on either side of it, just like cut down through those hills was this river, and the moon was shining off of it. The first time I saw this, was a fantastic sight. The moon was glistening on the river there. I could smell the catfish, and it was hot. Oh, I mean, really hot. Maybe 105, 110 degrees, maybe 99% humidity. And just then, just as I'm right in the middle of the bridge there on this night, I was late coming home, I saw this fantastic scene. It just all came together that night. It was about 9 o'clock. It was June night, and it was warm and sensual. Oh, I think one of the reasons why jazz came out of New Orleans and the river places like St. Louis. Now listen, this is a theory Shepard has. And I have lived in this place, so I know a little about it. That I think one of the reasons jazz came out of places like St. Louis and New Orleans, great fountainheads of jazz, is because of the sensuality, among other things. There are other elements, but the sensuality of river life is just not like any other kind of life in the country. There is a sensual quality, especially in the spring and in the fall and midsummer, to life on the shores of a river. How and why it is, it would take me 1,500 shows maybe to say, but it is a very sensual area. Sensual because you smell life itself. It's not like the ocean. The ocean is somehow remote. It's forbidding, it's awe-inspiring, it's a lot of things, it's dangerous. But the river somehow is like an artery or something that's flowing right out of the land, and you can see the land going up on all sides of it, and you could smell it. And so on this June night, I was walking across the bridge going towards Covington. Now this is going towards a border southern state. See, Kentucky was a border state all through the Civil War, as was parts of Ohio. Did you ever see a movie called Friendly Persuasion? They sure did a rotten version of it recently on television. It was terrible. It had nothing to do with the original. Friendly Persuasion was about the Civil War and its impact on the southern part of Indiana, which was a border area too, where people's loyalties were torn. You know, on one side you felt the South was right there, and the other side, the North, was way up there in Minnesota someplace, and here you were. So I was walking across the bridge this night. It was about 9, 10 o'clock, and it was hot, and I was really, I felt like a human cake of yeast. You know, you know those nights when you just feel like you just can't really stand the sensuality, or don't you ever feel that? Come on, Jim, you must occasionally. David, no, he goes to Princeton. I can't pay. He doesn't know these things. I'm talking about the basic animal in us. And I'm walking along in the dark, and the mosquitoes are around, and the fireflies were following you across the river, and they drift high, and way up in the air, high over the river, way up. Hawks are always circling. They circle over the river a great deal because, of course, dead fish, and they'll come swooping down on dead muskrat or something, and you see these hawks up against that soft moonlight, and it was hot. Oh, it was hot. When all of a sudden I hear this sound again, I hear this boop 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 way off in the distance, and then it hit me. I see where it's coming from. The first time I realized it, way upriver. Now remember, I was way up at the top, right at the peak of this suspension bridge, which is maybe 60 or 70 feet over the river. It's high up, it's suspended way up over, because this river has tremendous flood stages, and so the river bridge has to be very high. And I was maybe 8 or 9 or 10 stories, maybe more than that, above the surface of the water. And on either side, you could see these hills crawling up, way up to the sky, and way down at the bend of the river, I see this tremendous sight coming right around the bend. Great blaze of lights, just glowing, just like a jewel coming towards Cincinnati. It was the Delta Queen, and she was just coming from up somewhere near Portsmouth, and coming downstream. She was just coming downstream, drifting down towards ultimately Louisiana. What she did was come downstream, go past Louisville, and pick up passengers and mail and freight, and continue on down to finally, ultimately, New Orleans. That's where those paddle boats went. Have you ever wondered where the paddle boats went? You'd see the paddle boats. You think they just fooled around in New Orleans all the time so that the slaves could sing Old Man River? Well, they went to places like Cincinnati and St. Louis and Louisville. And you know that there were river pirates that would skulk in caves outside of Louisville and go out and hit these babies when they'd go by at night. Well, this great boat came around the bend, and you could hear the sound of it. That's the thing that in the dead silence that you don't hear much about, and I think that people miss in you might say, watching secondhand media like television or movies. That way off in the distance you could hear this big paddle wheel, see, is going into this water. You can hear this. It's got a sort of a kind of a reverberating throb to it. It goes like a little bit like this. It goes, and you can hear this thing, and that is echoing off of the sides of the hills that go arching up, and it was just ablaze with lights. And on board the boat, it was just about dinner time on the boat. You know, they have these elegant dinners on the boat, and this guy is playing a calliope. They had a calliope, a steam calliope, and he would sit up at the bow of this thing, way up in the front, and it had big handles. He'd sit up there, and he'd go boop 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 boop. He'd go, and the steam flies, and this tremendous boat had come down that river. Well, from that time on, it was such a sensational sight. There was nothing else on the river. There was not another boat. In fact, you couldn't see even lights in the hills. It was really dark. And this magnificent boat coming towards me on the river. And I stood up at the bridge, and I watched it drift downstream, and then he slowly drifted with the currents. You know, to be able to operate one of these babies against those currents takes really tremendous rivermanship, I suppose you'd call it. It's the art of Mark Twain piloting the boat. And all of a sudden, you just hear him cut the power, and the thing goes, and it drifts sideways down the river. This great boat, tremendous boat with all the thing ablaze with lights and all that white filigree and the people aboard. And then just at the last instant, he goes, and it just pushes it in, and it swings around, and he touched that wharf just like a virgin's kiss, man. It was fantastic. And he just drifted sideways and into the river, and then I stood up there and watched it, see, and I saw the guys throwing the ropes out. They were down below me, way down below and to my left on the Cincinnati side. And the gangplank went out. The people started to come off, and I says, what a fantastic sight. That very few places in America can you actually see a genuine paddle wheel riverboat come drifting downstream. And I mean one that's doing its job, not in a museum or tied up at a wharf and now it's a tricky little restaurant. I'm talking about the real thing doing it. And I'm just really glad that I had the chance to see it, you know. And every night after that, I would come back over the river just in time. I got to know the schedule. So every night at 10 after 9, that thing would come down around the Big Bend towards Portsmouth. I'd see him drift down. And then one night, the sister ship, the River Queen. There were two. There was the Delta Queen and the River Queen. The Delta, by the way, of course, is the Mississippi Delta. And they were both beautiful white ships. And one night, one of them blew up in Pittsburgh. Just blew up. Literally blew sky high, which is one of the problems with these boats. It just went boom. And a friend of mine was on the fantail of the ship when it blew. Yeah, he played the banjo of all things, and he was blown 115 feet. He landed, he's okay.